SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, in 3D.
Mr. Super Awesomeness, take him down. Maybe we should have picked a better superpower for you, Patrick.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking to yourself, oh, great, SpongeBob got the Smurfs treatment. Well, you're kind of right, but you might also be kind of wrong, too. Let's go and talk about this. Welcome to Time About the Movies, everybody. We're beginning a brand new month of movies, February 6, 2015. 3 films to take a look at, and the biggest one, of course, was the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water. This is, of course, the sequel to the 2004 SpongeBob SquarePants movie, even though it's not officially seen as a sequel. I mean, it's not really connected to anything, even though that movie in particular was supposed to be the finale of the show. But then, of course, they brought it back, and it's been, since 2005, it's been on ever since. But, story of this one is that you have a diabolical pirate played by Antonio Banderas, who steals the secret Krabby Patty formula. SpongeBob and his friends must travel to the surface in order to get it back. And like everybody else, I was looking at this in development and thinking to myself, they're going to do a live-action CG SpongeBob movie. Man, this is probably going to be lame, but believe it or not, the marketing for this movie is kind of lying to you on so many levels. For one thing, those human actors you see in the real world, they are nowhere to be found in this movie at all. There's no cute girl in a bikini with ice cream. There's no people talking about, I think they're in my spin class. Like, there's none of that in this movie. There are very few live people that actually have lines in this, and even when they do, it's very minimal. But here's the thing that people really didn't take into consideration with this film. Those live-action scenes that are all over the marketing for this, that's the last third of this movie. Most of this movie is 2D animated. And, to see 2D animation on a big screen anytime, especially in this time period where it's become kind of a dying art form because we've gone so far into CG in general, I mean, that's already enough for me to go like, okay, I'm in on this baby. But yeah, like I said, this wasn't as excruciating as it could have been, but I'll touch on that in a little bit here. How does the movie on a whole fare up? Really good. It actually is a return to form for SpongeBob SquarePants, a series that around this time was kind of losing its quality. The SpongeBob's kind of had the similar pathway to The Simpsons. The Simpsons has been on the air for so many years, but for a show that's been on for nearly 40 years, of course you're going to have those years where the show in particular is not going to have its strongest elements, stronger seasons. There's going to be those lulls here and there, but then the show finds its form again. SpongeBob definitely has found its form more recently with some of the later episodes they've done, but when I first saw this movie, the last time I remember watching the show a lot was around 2008 or 2009, so it was good to see the series get back to that old style it was doing. This really did feel like prime SpongeBob SquarePants mixed in with prime Nickelodeon when these Nicktoons were coming on the air. A lot of the original people who worked on the series came back for this movie, and you can definitely tell, considering some of the humor and adult references make a comeback in this. And with the first movie, there was at least a linear story to it to follow, a basic 3-act structure. Here, there's a story, and let's be honest, this is one where they just decided to go all nuts on it, man. I mean, to be fair, this is actually what I've been wanting to see for the series from a long time now. It leads to a lot of incredibly trippy and out-of-nowhere surreal moments that kind of would take place later in the later seasons of the show, where it's not even reminiscent of early SpongeBob, but we're throwing in a little bit of Ren and Stimpy in here. There's parts in this movie where the film just goes all chaotic. Like, there's a part where Plankton goes inside SpongeBob's brain, and it's so messed up inside of there, these weird images, and there's like a part where like these fluffy little pieces of cotton come together, and they all of a sudden spawn a kitten out of nowhere. It just goes meow. Like, it's just weird stuff. Like, there's a talking dolphin that controls the universe. Like, it would be incredibly stupid if the filmmakers weren't aware of this, but they are, and the characters are also aware of the self-relevant situations that you just go ahead and just go in for it, along for the ride. I mean, this is just a smidgen of the craziness that's in this movie. Like I said, this thing is mostly 2D animated except for the last 30 minutes. And considering how we haven't had a fully 2D animated film since Winnie the Pooh 4 years prior to this, it was nice to not only see 2D animation on the big screen, but also seeing how 2D animation looked in real 3D. I saw this in the Cinemark XD theater, and yeah, it's really kind of cool to see that. The animation was pretty impressive. The 3D SpongeBob characters were nicely done too. And let's talk about that 3D element, because when they do go into the real world, it actually is fun overall. It's tolerable, it's enjoyable, it's not making these stupid jokes, they're not making SpongeBob and the gang big-time idiots. They're aware of what's going on, and the whole fish out of water aspect is really, really short. It's about 5 minutes of the climax. Even the superhero element, which was the thing I was worried about going into this movie, it's played very well. It's very fun to watch. You could tell the filmmakers are doing a good job of playing around with these angles and all that. Like, I love the idea that they all become these superheroes, and when, Sandy becomes a superhero, what does she become? Is she dressed up? Is she a costume character like everybody else is? No. She's a big, tall, real-life, live-action squirrel, and when I first saw that, I was laughing so hard the first time I saw that, which is funny because there was actually, I think that was actually one of the plans for the original SpongeBob movie, where SpongeBob and Patrick went to the real world and they saw Sandy for the first time in live action, and that was supposed to be a real squirrel in that movie, but of course they brought that element here, and it's very well done. It's nicely comical and visually impressive to look at. You could just tell that Antonio Banderas is having the time of his life as this character, the villain of the movie, Burger Beard. His ability to go over the top with it, and you could tell he was willing to do whatever they asked him to do, and he'd go with it. He's just having the time of his life. My favorite scene of him in this movie is when it's in the climax of the movie where he's attacking the gang, and SpongeBob, he's throwing cannonballs at them, and SpongeBob, because he has the little bubble thing on his head, like, the cannons hit him, and, he goes through his little bubble thing at the top, and these things start, like, the cannonballs are, like, floating in the air, and he keeps doing it, and then he's just looking at what's going on, and he just gives this one great expression that I just love so much. That right there is my favorite joke in the movie, because how can you not laugh at a scene like that where, he's got this look on his face like, what the fuck is going on here? And yet he just still continues to fire. Like, he does not care. Like, that's just an example of the great over-the-top humor this film brings to the table. Now, granted, there are some flaws to the movie. There are some flaws in the storyline. Some things that are pretty lackluster, such as, the message they're trying to throw in about teamwork. It just feels kind of forced overall. Going back to the first movie, that film's message about you being able to do something regardless of how you act is more well represented there. But here, it's kind of like a tacked-on message. They kind of just threw it in there at the last minute, so there could be somewhat of a lesson. It's like that episode of Itchy and Scratchy where, it's just Itchy hitting Scratchy on the head, going like, ow, and Itchy's like, hee hee hee, and they do it a couple times. It's just like, and then at the end they're just like, kids, say no to drugs, and they just smile and go like, yee, like that type of thing. Like, but yeah, there are also some times when the story kind of goes all over the place, like when the secret formula is taken away, like the whole town all of a sudden just turns into Mad Max. I mean, quite literally, the whole thing just goes into a post-apocalyptic setting, which is funny because we're still a few months away from Mad Max Fury Road coming out. And then halfway through the movie, the mood changes once they realize that, there's this whole thing where they think SpongeBob and Plankton took the Krabby Patty secret formula, and then when they realize that, oh, they didn't take it at all of a sudden we shift the story to them going to find it, and then there's these subplots that keep getting put in about how Patrick doesn't have feet or something like that, like, elements that just kind of throw in there, just kind of, it felt like more of a studio thing to bring those in there, but, overall, this is a movie that works because of just how over-the-top silly it is, from the animation to its surreal humor, from the plot to Antonio Banderas just having a ball playing the villain. It's a good, fun movie that works because it knows that it's trying to be silly. It's not trying to bring, like, this big overall message overall, even though they're trying to force it in there. I really do think if you go into it just experience expecting to have a good time without thinking too much, you can really have a good time with this film. It really is a movie that not only appeals to the kids, not only appeals to the SpongeBob fans who have grown up with the show and now are starting families of their own, but also parents, teenagers, pretty much anybody can have a really good time with this movie if they go into with the right mindset. It's a fun time at the movies. It's just a really, really fun film. I can't recommend this one enough. Sponge Out of Water. What a great film it is. It's a really, really fun film. And trust me when I tell you, the next two movies we have here, you're gonna want to see the SpongeBob movie, because, yeah, the SpongeBob movie knows exactly what it is. These next two movies they're movies with high budgets, All these big stars, they think they can get away with that alone, but no, that's not the case. Such is the case with our first movie of the two, the big box office bomb that was the Wachowskis' Jupiter Ascending.
Jupiter Ascending, February 6th. Experience it in IMAX 3D, rated PG-13.
You know, it must be great to be the Wachowskis, who can basically get Warner Brothers to get behind what they do, because, hey, they made The Matrix 16 years ago, even though nothing they had done since The Matrix, with the exception of Speed Racer and, okay, technically V for Vendetta they produced, but they produced that movie. But Speed Racer was probably the best thing they directed. Unfortunately, that wasn't a hit when it came out, so Warner Brothers basically said, here's a blank check to do whatever you want, and they gave us this piece of garbage right here. I mean, this movie, oh my god, this was terrible. So Mila Kunis stars as Jupiter Jones, an ordinary cleaning woman, and Kane Wise, played by Channing Tatum, is an interplanetary warrior who informs Jones that her destiny exists beyond Earth. So it's one of those movies where it's trying to become the next Star Wars. And it's the Wachowskis literally described it as a mix between The Matrix and Star Wars, which it's neither one of those things whatsoever. This thing was an abomination of a movie. This thing is so fucking awful in the way that the story makes no sense. You could tell this is the biggest problem with it, simply and effectively, is that it's an original sci-fi concept that's trying to be this new groundbreaking thing. But people don't realize that stuff like Star Wars, Star Trek, The Matrix, those were lightning in a bottle moments. And you really need to come up with something really incredible and amazing if you're going to top what you did before. And sadly, this movie does not do any of that. This falls into the same traps as other knockoffs of those movies I mentioned before did. In TV shows in general, like Star Trek, Star Wars. Like, George Lucas has tried to recreate Star Wars so many goddamn times. We just looked at one of his lamest attempts with Strange Magic, but before this there was also Willow, which wasn't bad overall. Not as bad as they made it out to be, but certainly was no Star Wars. But this thing in particular was just a mess. You're sitting in this movie for 2 hours, and you're not getting anything out of it whatsoever. They spent over $200 million on this, and there are studios out there, there are movies out there that are a whole lot better, that only wish they can get their cock sucked like the Wachowskis were getting their sucked by Warner Brothers. I mean, I know it's graphic to say, but it's the god honest truth. I mean, come on. Look at the films they have done since The Matrix. The 2 Matrix sequels, which were terrible. You know, Cloud Atlas, which was awful. The best thing they did was Speed Racer, and that they wrote and directed, and that didn't do any money whatsoever. I mean, yeah, they produced stuff like The Animatrix and V for Vendetta, which were great overall, but yeah, this thing is just, this is bad. This is just really, really bad. Eddie Redmayne in particular in this, like, it's this movie you start to realize, oh, you know, a movie like this doesn't cause somebody to lose an Oscar. No, the Oscars basically already have an idea of who they want to give Oscars to, because you think Eddie Murphy was going to win an Oscar after Norbit? He was never going to win it at all. Like, he was, like, even though he was the front runner for many weeks, you could say, like, I mean, Eddie Murphy with Dreamgirls, Hugh Jackman was never winning for Les Miserables not because of movie 43, because they don't want to give him an Oscar for a movie where he actually is trying to be. No, they want to give him Oscars for a body of work or something like that. Because Eddie Redmayne, after watching him in this, he should not have won the Oscar for Best Actor in this. Like, I liked him in The Theory of Everything, but if that theory was true about how these movies, that come out in between the awards kind of ruin your chances of winning an Oscar when they're bad, I mean, this thing should have caused him not to win an Oscar whatsoever. But then again, you could also make the argument for Natalie Portman and No Strings Attached. But No Strings Attached wasn't a bad movie. It's actually a pretty good movie. But, I mean, it's just, he's terrible in this movie. He's a lame villain. He's doing over-the-top antics that don't work. I mean, this thing is just, it's a colossal mess. It's a colossal mess on so many levels, and the only reason why it's not considered one of the worst movies of the year to me is that this same weekend gave us another movie that's just as bad, if not worse, and that was over at Universal. Here's Seventh Son.
I'm no hero. I'm no warrior. I'm something else. Seventh Son, rated PG-13.
You're a steaming pile of shit is what you are. Yeah, Seventh Son. This is another one. This is one of those movies. This is somehow even worse than Jupiter Ascending. And Jupiter Ascending is bad, but the reason why I think this is even worse is because with Jupiter Ascending, you kind of expect what you're going to expect from it. A bad Wachowski brothers movie with some up-and-coming talent, Channing Tatum and Mila Kunis, but this, a cast that includes Ben Barnes from Prince Caspian and Stardust, Jeff Bridges, Alicia Vikander, Olivia Williams, Kit Harington from Game of Thrones, Jaimin Hansu, and Julianne Moore. It's based off of a novel, so in a way it's kind of trying to be the next young adult franchise, but you don't release a movie like this the weekend after the Super Bowl and expect to make any kind of money, which this thing did not. It was a gigantic failure at the box office, and really, you can kind of see why. Thomas Ward, a seventh son of a seventh son, and his adventures as the apprentice of the Spook, played by Jeff Bridges. You also have elements of, you could just, I forgot what I was going to say, but the point I'm trying to get across is that for some reason around this time period, Universal was just putting all this money on these films that were never going to be successful whatsoever, because not too long before this, we had 47 Ronin, which was a gigantic flop at the box office. Then the next year, there was The Great Wall. Or maybe I think it was 2 years after this, actually. And then you had Mortal Engines, which, tried to benefit from the fact that it had Peter Jackson behind it. And, failed miserably at the box office. Universal was spending all this money on garbage, straight up garbage films that were never going to make their money back. And The Spook's Apprentice wasn't even a book that most people really knew was even a thing. I didn't even know it was a thing until I started doing the review for this. The film doesn't work because it falls into the typical lame action film franchise territory where you have a story about this young kid who has no idea how to become a hero, and then throughout the course of the movie, he's got to train to become the champion of the world, the seventh son of the seventh son who's proving his worth, and it just doesn't work, man. This thing is such a snooze fest. This thing is bad. Jupiter Ascending is at least entertainingly bad for Eddie Redmayne's bad performance in that movie, because he really is bad in that movie. This, however, there's no excuse for this. This is just wasted money, wasting all this talent on a piece of garbage script that had no intentions of being good whatsoever. Who really thought this was going to be successful? Really, who? I mean, it's just, I got nothing else for you, man. This thing is pretty fucking bad. I think this is even worse than Jupiter Ascending. But then again, that's like comparing a piece of shit to a piece of shit. They're pretty bad, but you know what? At least Jupiter Ascending, the piece of shit, at least has something of value to it. At least I could see where they were coming from with that. There's no excuse for this. Nobody was going to go see this movie and make it a success. And sure enough, it was a massive failure for Universal. It lost them $85 million on this project. So that should tell you everything you need to know about how bad Seventh Son is. Just awful, awful film. Awful. So there you go. That's everything I have to say about the weekend of February 6, 2015 on Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we have the opposite of this weekend, where instead of one good movie and two really bad films, we have one really bad movie and two good films. The bad film being a movie that was highly anticipated when it came out, 50 Shades of Grey, based off the books by E.L. James, and featuring an actress I really liked at that point, an up-and-coming actress in Dakota Johnson. I thought if anything, she'll use this and take the Kristen Stewart route in Twilight, star in these bad movies, and then hopefully her career after that will be better, and it really kind of wasn't. But we'll touch on that. We'll touch on Matthew Vaughn's film, Kingsman: The Secret Service, with Taron Egerton and Samuel L. Jackson among its cast, along with Colin Firth. And we have the movie that was the inspiration for the television series most recently, What We Do in the Shadows. We have that movie from Taika Waititi. So 3 films to take a look at next time around. So we'll delve into those films coming up tomorrow on the show. With all that said, though, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go ahead and do me the honors of hitting that like button, that subscribe button, and that notification button. Also, don't forget to check out our playlist, and don't forget to check out the previous episode we did. So with all that said, whether it's in the past, the present, or the future, I will see you at the movies. Take care.